Welcome to Get Over It, the consciousness transforming podcast for exceptional 21st century living. Folks, we've got a good show today, and it's a very enlightening show. We're going to be talking about people in transition, whether they're going from male to female to male, or any other combination that people feel out there. So we're talking about the transgender community. It's important that people know about this, and in this day of age with hate raging all over the place between races and especially in the LGBTQ community, it's really important to have some knowledge. So we've got Paria Hassouri today with us, and she's going to be talking about her book, Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Child's Gender Change. And it's really eye-opening. She truly writes from the heart, and I think that if any other parents right now are going through this, you will identify with a lot of what she has to say. And if you are someone who hasn't gone through this, you have a lot to learn. So stay with us, because this is going to be a very eye-opening and thought-provoking show. The information shared on Get Over It uses intuitive and pragmatic insight to help you shift your consciousness to break through blocks and release energy that is no longer needed. Yes, we're going to help you let go of the BS that has been holding you back. But you guys know I always ask that question, are you truly ready to? And by the way, folks, BS is belief system. A bit about me for my new listeners: intuitive since birth. I'm a third-generation intuitive with over 3 decades of experience supporting people to break through the blocks along their path. I'm a strategist for personal and professional transformation, revealing cutting-edge information that enables you to prosper and thrive. I spent 25 successful years in corporate America as an executive sales professional, and I am the founder of Healing Visions Ministries and the Northern California Children's Education Network, a 501c3 nonprofit. I provide consultations and healings in all areas of life that heal the mind-body-spirit connection, allowing you to live your very best life. My clients tell me that I keep it real while providing them with accurate information to assist them along their journey as a spirit living a human existence, but they also say, if you really don't want to know, don't ask Monique. My background includes a doctorate in metaphysics, Reiki master teacher, ordained minister, and clinical hypnotherapist, so whether you are stressed, depressed, or possessed, I can help. To find out more about me and my services, go to my website, and that's MoniqueChapman.com, and I invite you to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. As her daughter transitions from male to female, Paria ultimately discovers her own capability to evolve, what it truly means to parent, and how to use her voice to raise awareness on behalf of the transgender community. My guest today, Paria Hassouri, is the author of Found in Transition, a pediatrician, mother of 3, and transgender advocate. Her essays have been published in the Washington Post, LA Times, Huffington Post, and Woman's Running magazine. She lives in LA, and you can check her out online at her website, and that's pariahassouri.com, PariaHassouri.com. So one more time, PariaHassouri.com. Welcome, Paria.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you. I mean, you've got a great background being a physician yourself, but when your child came out to you, you thought of it as a little bit of a shock, kind of took you back. And because of all of that, and you finally embraced it, and then you came out to support your child, and then you wrote this wonderful book. So why the title, Found in Transition?
Well, I think the title Found in Transition is really reflects my journey through this process, and how while my daughter transitioned from male to female, I also went through my own personal transformation and dealt with a lot of my own insecurities from my past, and how that was causing me to parent her with fear instead of love, and also really found myself and who I am the same price at the same time that she was transitioning. So Found in Transition is really more a reflection on my journey and my evolution during her transition process.
Yeah, well, as I was reading the book, it seemed as if it was a transition for the whole family and those around you that you knew, because everything was looked at in a different light. Now, you're an Iranian immigrant, and sometimes, in all cultures, Black culture too, being gay, transgender, any place on the LGBTQ, BQ spectrum is just not accepted. How was it culturally for you when you found out?
I think for me personally, it wasn't as big of an issue culturally. It was really more of, here is something about my child that I knew nothing about. And so for me, it was really more of an identity shock as a mother and as a pediatrician than culturally. I mean, the cultural part that played into it was because I am an Iranian immigrant, and I grew up in a very white neighborhood in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I had experienced some bullying and had sort of always felt like I was on the outside. I had this fear that now my daughter was going to be the ultimate outsider, and so the cultural part was more about having experience being on the outside, and then now feeling like my daughter was going to potentially be the ultimate outsider. But otherwise, I think I wasn't really worried about it from a cultural standpoint, but I think it really shook my identity as a mother and a pediatrician.
Okay. What was the biggest mistake that you think you've made going through this whole process with Ava?
I think I've made a lot of mistakes, but probably
of
the biggest mistakes. Yes, probably one of the biggest mistakes I made was that when she came to me and at 13 and a half and told me that she's transgender, I didn't really listen to her, and I assumed that I knew her better than she knows herself as her mother, and because she's a teenager, and so how could she, so she just must be confused and she doesn't know anything and these things. And so I didn't really listen to her with an open mind and an open heart and hear what she has to say. That therefore, and so went into denial mode instead of listening to what she had to say, and that delayed her care for at least 6 to 9 months, which fortunately didn't have too terrible of a consequence for her, but it certainly could have.
Yeah, but that at 6 to 9 months, it seems like normal birth, normal pregnancy is 9 months. The child can survive at 6 months. It was like you having a chance to give birth again, but birth to yourself. At least that's what I felt when I was reading through the book. You both went through this major transformation together. And what really caught my attention, I'd love for you to share this story with the audience, is Ava shaving her legs and you shaving your legs at a young lady's age. Tell the audience about that, because it was quite telling, I think.
Yeah, so it was interesting because she actually, when she had come out, and I was still in my denial and anger and grief sort of phase, she had gone and shaved her legs behind my back, and I was so upset that she had done that, mainly because she was just a child who usually never really did anything without my permission. And so when she first shaved her legs without my permission, I realized, she's doing this. I need to sort of take her seriously. But she also described the first time that she shaved her legs as sort of feeling like a caterpillar shedding, and that she sort of, when she felt her smooth, leg after shaving, it was like she had found her body again, or the body that she had known, pre-puberty, and she felt like herself. And when I was the first time I shaved my legs, so it sort of the first time I shaved my legs, I think I was in 6th grade, and I shaved my legs behind my mom's back. My mom, did not want me to, just sort of a little culturally conservative at that point, and thought that, I should be older before I start shaving my legs. And everybody else in 6th grade was shaving their legs, and I would be playing four squares or whatever, and look at the legs of these my classmates who are very like blonde and white and fair, and I had these brown legs with thick dark black hair, and I just felt like I really stood out. And so, I remember the first time that I shaved my legs behind my mom's back, I sort of felt a little less foreign and other, and so we had sort of, so Ava and I both, shaved our legs sort of earlier and against our mother's wills, but had this similar experience of feeling like you've sort of found yourself and belong more, through it. So
yeah, I when I read it was like, wow, badge of independence for both of them, and they both did it the same way. Not necessarily Ava knowing what you had done, but it was just wonderful to see how you both came to terms, and then you both stood out in a way that you could stand up and believe for what it was that you were, looking to move forward on. Now, in the book, you talk a lot about your emotions behind, Ava, and what she was looking to do. And you were supportive, once you could get on board, you were supportive. How long did it take you to come to the realization that, okay, she's serious, this is not a fad, this isn't, a game for her, this is what she truly wants? How long did it take you to come to that conclusion, and what were the major points that you grappled with before you reached that conclusion?
I think it took about 6 to 9 months. I think the main issue was, when she came out at 13 and a half to us, we were completely blindsided by it. We didn't think she had any, signs of being trans when she was a younger child. So we just thought, okay, this is some teenage confusion, attention getting phase kind of thing. But about 6 months after she came out, I had a call from a school counselor, and she had gone into the school counselor's office and said that she was having thoughts of self-harm and suicidal thoughts again. And so when the counselor called me, it was like, okay, well, it's time to change strategy from, what I've been doing, hasn't been working. And what I had been doing is taking her to various therapists, but sort of not really listening to them and switching her therapist around and that, and not really taking her specifically to like the Los Angeles Gender Center, or really learning and educating myself more. And so that was sort of a turning point where it was like, well, this is not working. I mean, I can't have her having suicidal thoughts. I need to switch strategies. And then I ended up going to my first support group meeting, Transforming Family, for parents of trans and gender diverse children. And I think that first support group meeting where I, walked in, and there were so many other parents like me whose kids had come out as teens or older, young adults, and the parents had been completely blindsided the way I had. And for the first time, it felt like, okay, our story is not unique, and, I'm not alone. And if there's so many other kids that have had this same story and their parents have been completely blindsided by it, then this is probably real, and I need to start doing something about it. So I think it was really that combination of that call from the school teacher, then making me finally end up in a support group, and then really that support group is where my education process, took off, really.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any clue, though, as, a mother raising your child? Did you have the slightest clue, now that you look back on your life and your experiences with Ava, as to whether or not, there was a sign there, but I chose to ignore it?
I really, really have racked my brain so many times and, combed through all of my memories. And I don't think that there was ever anything that, knowing what I knew then, I would attribute to gender, So
okay.
Usually we think of, trans kids as, okay, they want to maybe, wear clothing that is not traditionally, meant for them, or play with toys that aren't traditionally for them, or get involved in activities, or basically we think of trans kids as having signs of that would be related to gender in some way or another. And she really never did. She did have depression off and on, for which there was never really a good explanation, but there was never anything to say that gender may be the source of the underlying depression.
Okay. In the book, you share a wonderful story about ironing her purple dress, I believe it was, before she came out to the family. Tell us how you felt when you were ironing your dress for your now daughter, and how did the family accept her?
So I will never, that scene of ironing her dress for the first time. She wanted to wear a dress to Thanksgiving, and she just told me, I left something on my bed for you to iron, and I went and I saw it was a maroon dress, and I knew it was going to be a dress. And that first time you're ironing a dress for what in your mind and heart at that time you still see as your son. And you're just thinking, how did this happen? How did I end up here? It's sort of a scenario you've never pictured or imagined that you're going to end up in, as a mother. And I just was so full of fear for what her future was going to hold, while I was ironing this dress. And I think, the family, I think it was the hardest for me as her mother by far, of all the people. It was then second hardest for my husband, but he had an easier time than I did. Her siblings were completely fine. And, I think there was some drama that Thanksgiving. My mom also didn't, I kind of called my sister or texted my sister to let my mom know that Ava would be coming to Thanksgiving for, in a dress for the first time. And, my mom wasn't, even though she already knew what was going on with Ava and she had been supportive, but she still wasn't super thrilled about Ava showing up in a dress. It's one thing to say you support, and then another thing to see your grandchild in a dress for the first time at Thanksgiving. And so it was that was a really stressful Thanksgiving and a very stressful time. But I think overall, everyone around us really rallied to support her. And I think we've had as almost as good of an experience and support system as one can hope to have.
Okay. I think when I was reading the book, at least I took it this way, as a wake-up call. At some point, Ava had questions, but for whatever reason, she didn't want to ask or bother you. So she was going to Reddit for information, and you about blew a gasket. Was that a wake-up call, and how did you feel about your child not feeling comfortable to talk to you about what was most pressing on her heart?
Yeah, I think at that time I was so angry. It should have been a wake-up call when she was going on Reddit to ask questions, but I was really so angry at that time that my own anger and what was happening with my own emotions really clouded my vision of being able to see, what was going on with her. And I didn't know what Reddit was, and so it was very scary to me that she's going online and she could potentially develop some sort of online relationship with someone who's like answering her questions, and then that could put her in danger and her siblings in danger. I still don't actually know exactly what Reddit is, and so
Me neither.
I was so I was so consumed with my with anger and fear that I didn't look at it as like, hey, she's having to go there because when she tries to come to you, you're saying no, And who is she supposed to ask her questions from, because she did have a therapist, but you have access to your therapist once a week for 50 minutes, and between you can't call and text your therapist 100 questions, So, it should have been a wake-up call, but I was so stuck in my own emotions that unfortunately it wasn't.
Well, you know what? You're entitled because it's always a process. Folks, we're speaking with Paria Hassouri, MD. She's the author of Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Child's Gender Change. You can check her out at her website, and that's pariahassouri.com, PARIAHASSOURI.com. Paria, it was interesting to me when Ava, identified as female. She took on a name, and she really liked the name Lucy, but you didn't seem to agree with that too much. How come?
Yeah. So for us, names have a huge significance in our family. I mean, for all parents, I'm sure, names have a lot of significance. You spend so much time thinking about what you're going to, name your kid and not. And so many people name their kids, after a family member or, a grandparent or, the middle name of somebody significant to them or, something like that. And so for us, all our children had made it a point to give our children all Middle Eastern names and, Iranian names. And, my other two kids' names are Arman and Shada. And so when she told us initially that she wanted the name Lucy, it felt like not only was she going to have go by a different gender identity, but that it was almost like she was leaving it at that time. It felt like you're just trying to leave the family, altogether, because Lucy is in no way, just not, Middle Eastern, and I just felt no connection to it. And it felt like, if I, introduce my children to someone and I'm like, these are my children, Arman, Lucy, and Shada, like, to me, it just felt like that didn't fit. And so it was very important for me for her to have a name that I felt still culturally fit in with our family. So we ended up, and she definitely wanted a name that was also American. So we ended up giving her a list of names that can be American, but we also have in our culture. And we have the name Ava, except we pronounce it Ava in Iranian. So we kind of, she actually does like it pronounced Ava, so we do call her Ava. My mom called her Ava, Okay. So it just felt like, felt important to me for us to still have some say in her in naming her again.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ava's gone through a lot, and we'll get to that in a moment. But do you feel that she has any regrets, or are you fearful that she might have regrets and want to go back to being a male?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I think a lot of my hesitation, even once I started accepting that this was probably a real thing in allowing her to transition, was what if she would change her mind later, and what if she would have regrets. And her physicians at that time told us that the chance that she would change her mind or have any sort of regret would be at most 2 to 3% in kids who present at teen or later. She does not have any regrets. I do not have any regrets. I don't think that she will ever have any regrets. I've learned now that nothing in life is 100%, but I feel 99.9% sure that this is who she is, and that she won't regret it. I do, and I've also realized that even, let's say that in the 0.1% chance that she does change her mind, later, I still think that we have made the right decisions for her, for now, for the child, we have in front of us, today, and the child we had in front of us, a couple of years ago. So.
Okay. Now, you're a very successful pediatrician. How has the experience with Ava and even your other 2 children, because they don't come with a book, how has that helped you enhance your practice in dealing with parents?
Yeah, I think, with something like this, I've become a lot more aware of gender in general, and I think not just in terms of trans or gender diverse kids, but really becoming aware of how much we do impose gender roles and gender expectations on children, and really making an effort to take gender out of things, or, sort of approach things from a gender neutral stand, whenever possible. I've also really started to be better at recognizing signs of a possible gender issue in children that aren't sort of the traditional signs we think of. And so, for example, a lot of trans children and teens will have things like, unexplained depression, or social difficulties, or sometimes some sensory issues are more common in trans kids, or, there's a higher rates of ADHD in trans kids, because their minds are so occupied with sort of gender noise that they have a harder time, with focus and attention. So I've also just learned to, recognize other signs that could potentially be, a clue to the child having a possible gender issue when it's not so obvious. And I've had to educate myself a lot on just transgender care in children and teens, and become a resource for all the other pediatricians in my group as well.
So are there now continuing education courses on trans and LGBTQ for physicians so that they can have a further understanding?
There are many. However, they're not mandatory. So if somebody doesn't, physicians every year are required to do a certain amount of continuing medical education credits to maintain their licenses, but you get to choose what topics you do that in. So I have done a lot of it in trans care, but most physicians probably still don't. So, and I think that really there should be some requirement for all primary care physicians to learn sort of the basics of trans care and get some training, which really hasn't been a requirement so far.
Okay. Now, are there doctors out there who specialize and I'm not talking the doctors that perform the operations, but are there doctors out there who specialize in working with trans people?
Yeah, so working with trans people is not a medical specialty the way you become like a cardiologist or a pulmonologist. You don't have to be. Usually we think of hormones as something that endocrinologists take care of, but really to do trans care, you just have to sort of have an interest in providing care to this population and then just learn what the medications are and what needs to be monitored and do it. So most doctors who are doing most doctors who are doing trans care are internal medicine doctors or family physician doctors or pediatricians who just have an interest in this and then end up treating patients and then their practice sort of gets tailored towards that because they're maybe one of the few doctors in their area who are doing it.
Okay. So tell us a bit about you and your work with activism in this arena. I mean, I think that we are presented with many opportunities all the time, and Ava had presented you with a wonderful, mind-blowing, life-changing opportunity, and you took it. So tell us about that.
Yeah. I think so. A lot of what I'm doing in terms of activism is I think just visibility is a form of activism in itself. There's the statistics that, up to 80% of Americans think that they either haven't met a trans person or don't, know a trans person, well. And so I think just being visible and sharing our story, and if somebody, reads my book, even if they haven't met me or they hear me talk, they might feel like, oh, well, now they sort of know a family, with a trans kid. And then when there's, something in the news or, media about trans people and trans rights, they're more likely to, pay attention and see, what the issue is. So I think just being visible is definitely a form of activism in itself. I have now the support group I go to, Transforming Family. I became one of their board members, and so I do a lot of intake calls for new families that have trans kids. I, joined the National Center for Transgender Equality and became a member there, and the Human Rights Campaign, and follow all the work that they do. And they often have petitions to sign and different ways that you can help and ways that you can donate and volunteer and make a difference. I'm giving various talks, so yes, really I went from not knowing anything about this field to educating myself as much as possible and surrounding myself with a community of other parents, with trans kids who are really fighting hard for equal rights, for their children.
Okay. Well, what would you say to a parent listening now whose child has come out and they still can't wrap their mind around it? What message would you give to that parent?
I would say, I would really say don't underestimate your capacity to evolve along with your child if you really open your mind and listen to them. Mm-hmm. And I think what made the greatest difference for me was going to a support group and hearing other parents with stories similar to mine. So, I would say if you haven't And I initially had resistance towards going to a support group, so I would say if you haven't reached out for support from other families who are experiencing the same thing, do that. I whenever we get a new family in our support group, and they come for that first meeting sort of completely, bewildered and lost and not knowing what to do, I say, you came to your first meeting, you're going to be, I know you're going to change and be able to over time accept it and move on and evolve with your child. I think going to that first meeting is so very important.
Okay, and just supporting your child and living your child. And sometimes it's hard with the information or whatever that the child brings home, what they present to you. But I think if we look at it as a learning experience, and then instead of attacking, digest and, ask questions so that you can accept, it would turn out much, much better for everybody involved. Now, Ava, where is she now in school? What grade?
She's a senior in high school and applying to colleges.
And she wants to be a what?
She actually really likes, right now, she's really into writing and literature, and she thinks she wants to be a literature professor, but she has changed her mind over the years a few times, but that's right now what she's thinking she would like to do.
Okay, well,
she does write really beautiful poetry, so.
Okay. Well, I think that she's a voice to be reckoned with. Now, when we go to your website, PariaHassouri.com, what are we going to find there?
So on my website, there's going to be some links to various articles I've written for the New York Times and the LA Times, and there's going to be links to some of the podcasts I've done. There's a link to my old blog, and there's also a contact me area where anybody can. I answer all emails that I get, for families who are struggling with this. Many of them have emailed me, and people can also subscribe to my newsletter. And when I have an article that I've written or, other things to share, I send out information to people. So a lot of information on sort of things that I'm doing. And also a great way just to reach out to me with any questions.
Yeah, and folks, as you can tell, she's very soft and kind and wonderful. You can feel the love emanating from Paria's heart as we're speaking together, and I'm quite sure you're going to get that should you contact her. And she's put the information out there. She's opened the door for you. So if you are a parent who is struggling to come to terms with this, reach out. Okay, I know so many parents who, they called me and the typical question is, and you're like, I want to reach to the phone and strangle, but the typical question is, can it be prayed out of them? I'm like, no, that's who they are.
No.
Did any of that ever cross your mind when Ava was little, that maybe prayer or affirmations or treatment would, just flip the script, or what?
No, I definitely never thought about that. I mean, I just didn't know, when she first came out, whether this was actually true for her or she, but
no,
I didn't think that if this is genuinely who she is, that it is something that anybody can alter or do anything about, other than support them if that's truly who they are.
Yeah, it was interesting when my youngest son came out to me. He's gay, and I was, eventually you tell other people, and I told someone who we met when our kids were in kindergarten, and when my kid was 10, he got attacked by a dog, and it was pretty vicious. So when I told him that, he's gay, the first thing that came out was, that damn dog attack. And I'm like, huh?
Oh, what?
I'm like, what? And they blame
Yeah.
the dog attack for him being gay. And I haven't spoken to them since because they are not in the mindset
Yeah,
of,
that's
you
just,
know.
so
Well,
out
like,
there that where do you even start with that,
exactly. Put one together with the other. So it's really,
Yeah.
really strange. Well, Paria, I do appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this because it's much needed now, especially in these times that we're living in. Are you ever afraid for Ava, or is Ava ever afraid for her safety? Because you're hearing about so many people being attacked these days.
Yes, absolutely. Violence against trans women, particularly trans women of color, is really very, very scary and real. And so, we just try our best to be as safe as possible. I mean, right now, obviously, it's a pandemic, and so we're home. She's, she's
like
not going out and walking home, late at night or things like that. But we, it definitely is something we worry about, and we are, careful, and we make sure she, never walks home, alone at night, or doesn't get in a Lyft or Uber, without a friend, pre-pandemic, So absolutely, to say that we have no fear would be completely an unrealistic statement. Yes.
Okay. Well, the one thing I forgot to
we're
bring
hoping that over time it gets better.
Well, that's
that
our
when
prayer,
people have
right?
more knowledge,
Well, just acceptance. You don't even have to like it or like the person.
Right.
Just, that's who you are. No judgment. Fine. And just move on. So many people today that have such great judgments. One thing I wanted to mention earlier, and I didn't, I actually had a question around it, was at some point in time, you guys talked about freezing Ava's sperm in order for her to have biological children later. For the audience's sake, is that a reality, and did it happen in your case?
Well, we did freeze her sperm, so she does have frozen sperm in case she would like to have biological children in the future. Then she could absolutely do that if she wanted to. It depends on the age of the child, transitioning, and it's also, like freezing eggs for trans men. Freezing eggs is a much more difficult process and a much more costly process. So it's not realistic or doable for everybody, but it's certainly a possibility for some.
Okay, I chuckled when I read the part about the 3-day masturbation schedule and how you had to send whatever in FedEx to, where it needed to go. It was like, you really supported your child. Okay, and I commend and congratulate, because that's a lot. So I really commend and congratulate you. Well, Paria, thank you again for being with us today. I greatly appreciate your time and your attention.
Thank you so much for having me and sharing this with your audience. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's an important subject to share. And folks, remember that the most important choice that you can make is what you choose to make important. Consider making the masterful choice of acceptance. Abundant blessings, light, and love to all. Agape.